Hi, I'm Paul Carroll, technical writer for Digital Photo Magazine, and welcome to this video tutorial on making a solarized black and white image in Photoshop. In this technique, I'm going to show you how to take a full colour image and convert to black and white, apply a solarized effect, apply some subtle yellow tinting to the highlights, and sharpen the fine details all within the Camera Raw interface. And then finally, we're going to open our image into Photoshop so we can clean up any imperfections on the petals of the lily using the clone stamp tool. Solarization is a black and white photography technique that evolved out of the traditional wet darkroom. It involved making a print in the traditional way, but then exposing it to a flash of light before it was developed. This had the effect of partially inverting the tones to create a look that's a halfway house between a positive and a negative image. As you can see, it creates a really striking effect, and it's a great technique to use on subjects that have got clearly defined shapes and forms. Creating a solarized effect digitally is done really easily by manipulating the tone curve to invert the tones. And if you shoot RAW, there's no need to go into the main imaging editing area of Photoshop when you've got access to the tone curve within the Camera Raw interface. The advantage of applying the effect in this way means you can squeeze out every bit of quality from your RAW file. Okay, enough of the introduction. Let's close down this final image and then I can show you how the effect is achieved. Start by opening the image lily.dng off the CD into Photoshop. You're going to need to use the full version of Photoshop to follow this tutorial. But if you're using Photoshop Elements, there is an alternative method which is also a video tutorial on this month's CD, so make sure you check that out. We're going to start by cropping the image just to recompose the shot and lose this messy area at the bottom of the stem. So up in the toolbar, click and hold on the crop icon, and from the menu you need to select 2 to 3 from the list. Now draw a crop box over the lily by clicking with your left mouse button and just dragging, and I want to crop somewhere around there. I'm just going to reposition the crop box by clicking and moving it in the center of the crop box there. I'm just going to go a little bit tighter at the top here, something like that. That looks good. And then if you just select the hand tool in the toolbar, it'll apply the crop. Okay, next we want to convert our shot to mono, and we can do that using the HSL Grayscale tab, which is the 4th tab along in the Camera Raw interface. Click on the tab and you can see right at the top of the palette we've got a box which says Convert to Grayscale, and all we need to do is pop a tick in that box and there we are, we've converted to mono. Okay, now for the really interesting bit. We need to invert those tones, and we can do that using the tone curve, which is the 2nd tab along in the Camera Raw interface. So just click on Tone Curve. The way the tone curve works is the original tonal values in the image are plotted along this horizontal axis, in the same way as an image histogram, with the darker pixels on the left getting progressively lighter as you go to the right along the axis. The tone curve then runs in a diagonal line from the bottom left-hand corner to the top right-hand corner and represents the image as it was originally shot. Manipulating the tone curve in a conventional way, you'd use these sliders at the bottom of the palette and move the highlight slider to the right, which pushes the tone curve in the brighter end of the tonal region up, lightening the highlights. And you move the shadow slider to the left, which has the effect of darkening the pixels in the darker end of the tonal register, so we create an image with more contrast. In this technique, however, we're going to make much more dramatic alterations to the tone curve, and we can't do that in this parametric tab. We need to move over to the point tab, and in here we can use these control points on the tone curve to manipulate the curve however we like. You can manipulate the tone curve by clicking on one of the control points and holding with your left mouse button, and then dragging the control point around, which changes the curve. And you can see as I'm moving it around, the image is changing in real time. Now when you're experimenting with your own images and trying to cook up some different looks, then this is a great way of seeing the effects which you can achieve. In this technique, however, I know exactly what input and output values I want for each of the control points on the tone curve. So instead of dragging the tone curve around, I'm simply going to highlight a control point and then input figures into the input and output boxes to set the curve exactly how I want it. So let's start with this second control point along the line from the bottom left hand corner. I want an input value of 72 and an output value of 198. Next, I'm going to click on the central control point, and this time I want an input value of 139 and an output value of 30. And you can see on the image already those two adjustments have made a very good job of solarizing our lily. Now I'm going to click on the control point in the top right hand corner of the tone curve, and the input value of 255 is OK, but now I want an output value of 0. Next, I'm going to click on the fourth control point along the line, and this time I want an input value of 241 with an output value of 193. Take a look at our lily now, and you can see that we've got quite a lot of burnt out pixels, which are these pixels here in the highlights, which are now burning out because the tone curve is hitting the top of the graph. So I need to pull that back a bit, and I can do that by adding a new control point on the tone curve. All I need to do is click with my mouse roughly about halfway along the line there, and there you go, I've added a new control point. So I'm just going to change the input and output values for my new control point. So I'm going to have an input of 210 with an output of 194. And there we go, that's the solarization stage of our technique complete. And as you can see, we've got a partially inverted tonal range, and our lily is now somewhere between a positive and a negative image, with this lovely white outline to the edge of the buds and the petals, which is another characteristic of solarized images. So although it's looking really good, I just want to add another dimension, and we're going to tone the highlights. We can still do that in the camera raw interface, however, and all we need to do is click on the split toning tab, which is the fifth tab along. In this tab, we've got controls to set the hue and saturation for both the highlights region and the shadows region, and set the balance between the two toning colours. So it's a great way of applying a split toning effect. But we're going to use it just to apply some subtle toning to the highlights. So to do that, we need to click on the balance slider and drag it all the way to the right to set it to a value of plus 100. That means only the hue and saturation which we set under the highlights section of the split toning tab will be applied to our image. If you want to experiment with which colours you'd like to tone the highlights with, all you need to do is crank up the saturation a little bit, and then you can use the hue slider, and just by dragging it to the right you'll go through the full colour gamut, having a look at the different highlights toning which you could settle on. You can get some really dramatic effects, but I want to go for something a little bit more subtle. So I'm just going to knock back the saturation to input level of around 13, and I want to go for that nice yellow tone. So again, I'm just going to knock the hue back, and I'm going to settle on a yellow tone around a value of 56. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, so we're nearly done in the camera raw interface, but the last stage before we go into Photoshop is to apply some sharpening to the petals. And you can do that in the Detail tab, which is the third tab along. When you're applying sharpening, it's a great idea to zoom into 100%, and you can do that using the zoom controls here in the bottom left hand corner. So just click on the downward arrow, and I'm just going to select 100%. We selected the hand tool from the toolbar earlier, so we can now just click with our left mouse button and drag the image around until we can see a nice bit of petal. I'm just going to choose this nice big one at the top. Typically, when you apply some sharpening to an image, you will use the amount and radius sliders. The amount slider controls how much pixels along a contrast edge are either lightened or darkened to give the appearance of a sharper image. In our solarized image, however, we don't want to adjust the appearance of these edges. Instead, I just want to enhance the textures and the details in the petals here. And we can do that using the detail slider. Click on the slider and I'm just going to drag it to the right to increase the amount of detail sharpening. And as I go, you can see that we're just enhancing the contrast and the sharpening in the petals. So I'm going to set it to a value of around 80. And if I use the preview box up here in the toolbar, by unchecking the preview and rechecking, you can see how we've enhanced the image, and the detail in those petals is now looking a lot sharper. Okay, so we're finished in the camera raw interface. And to close down the image and save all those adjustments, all you need to do is click Done, and then every time you open up the file lily.dng, all of those camera raw adjustments will be applied to your raw file. I'd like to clean up some of the imperfections on the petals, and to do that I'm going to use the clone stamp tool in Photoshop. So just click Open Image to open the file into the main image editing area. When you're using the clone stamp tool, it's a good idea to apply the adjustments onto a new layer. That way you've always got the original in case you go wrong. To create a copy of this layer, we're going to need to see our layers palette on the screen. So go up to the window menu and down to layers, and there you go, you see the layers palette pop up, and then simply drag the background layer over the new layer icon at the bottom of the layers palette, and that creates a duplicate copy of our background layer. We also want to zoom in very tight on our image so that we can work precisely, and to do that I'm just going to select the zoom tool from the toolbox and then zoom in on a small area of the petal. Going to click again and zoom into 100%. Next I'm going to select the clone stamp tool from the toolbox and configure my brush size. So a 30 pixel soft edge brush with 100% opacity and 100% flow is fine. And then I just need to hold down the space bar, which brings up the hand tool, and then I can scroll around the image looking for imperfections. So here's one. Simply hold down the Alt key to sample a clean area next to the imperfection, and then move my brush over the imperfection and click, and there you go, I've cloned it out. So all I need to do now is work my way around the image, cloning out all the imperfections on the petals. It's a big one here, so I'm just going to increase the size of my brush by pressing the right hand square bracket key on the keyboard, and there we are, cloned it out. Okay, so this is going to take a few minutes cloning out all these imperfections, so I'll join you again when I'm done. So there we go, my finished solarized lily. All I need to do is flatten the layers, which I can do by going to the layer menu and down to flatten image, and then I can save the image as a JPEG on my computer. I'll just select JPEG from the file format menu, and then I can either print this image or share it electronically. Okay, I hope you've really enjoyed this solarization video tutorial. Give it a go using the start image from off the CD, and then get solarizing your own images in the future. Okay, cheers!